Agent Norman Jayden, FBI.
Agent Norman Jayden, FBI, sent to investigate the case of the infamous origami killer, who kills children by drowning them in rainwater and leaves an origami as a symbol after killing them. Norman Jayden is one of the 4 playable characters of Heavy Rain, a game that was released back in 2010 and was met with critical and commercial success. Now, the game itself is not very good, but there are some good things in it. Some nice challenges, action scenes, and music. And Norman Jayden is one of these things. Honestly, I was thinking about making an entire video about Heavy Rain as a game, but to be honest, out of the 4 playable characters, Norman is the only one that is remotely interesting, and the only reason I would ever replay Heavy Rain. The other ones are a depressed father named Ethan Mars, the actual protagonist, who lost his first son in a car accident and whose second son is being kidnapped by the origami killer. Madison Page, a journalist who is willing to do everything it takes to find the truth, and Scott Shelby, a private detective hired by the families of the origami killer's victims, and who am I kidding, Scott Shelby is the origami killer. Yeah, I know it's stupid because the game makes you play Scott Shelby for the entire time while lying to you about the fact that he's the actual killer and is just trying to cover his tracks. Needless to say, this creates countless plot holes and weird elements that make no sense. And to be honest, the characters are kinda boring. Like, Ethan is put in interesting situations, but he's always just so depressed it's boring. Madison is just a sex bot. Yeah, that's it. That's basically how David Cage treats her for most of the game, which is very creepy sometimes. And Shelby's ruined because of the stupid twist that he was the actual killer the entire time. But from what I've seen on Reddit and YouTube, Norman Jayden is the most popular and interesting character in the game. I mean, look at the premise. An FBI agent sent to investigate a mysterious case about a serial killer and is equipped with technologically advanced glasses that help him investigate crime scenes. Of course, such an advanced piece of technology requires a destructive counterbalance in the form of a drug called tryptocane, a drug that helps Jayden deal with the RE's side effects. But of course, this drug is highly addictive and could end up killing him just like any drug. It is a recognizable trope in detectives and it is very interesting. But what makes Norman Jayden stand out throughout the story is his overall sense of self-awareness and role in the game. His actual story, while not very good, is the most consistent in the game too. So let's talk about his role in Heavy Rain. Norman's story begins with him arriving at the crime scene. The dead body of a child has been discovered by the police, his face covered in mud, and an origami figure was found there as well, meaning that this is the origami killer's latest victim. He goes to the crime scene and meets Lieutenant Carter Blake, the lead investigator assigned to the case. And if you the player investigate long enough, he will find some tracks on the other side of the road confirming what type of car the killer uses. His second chapter is called Welcome Norman, a fitting name considering what happens. He makes his way to the police station where he meets Captain Perry and talks about the origami killer's killing spree. He also sees a golden watch that is given to lieutenants. He gets an office and starts to use the RE to investigate and gather clues in a virtual environment. After this, he gets an withdrawal attack because, as we learn, he's addicted to this drug called tryptocane. Again, nothing really happens in this chapter, but it does a good job of setting up the overall environment. You see, if the first chapter was supposed to establish the investigating crime scene and the RE mechanic, this chapter helps establish Norman's situation and overall environment that he will be working with. The next chapter is called Kickoff Meeting. This is where Norman's story finally starts to take shape. During a presentation, Norman tries to explain the origami killer's psychology and patterns. And during this meeting, Lieutenant Carter Blake will act aggressively towards Norman by calling him a bureaucrat who only works behind desks, and his psychological degree is useless. This is to show Blake's inherent jealousy and hatred of Norman. I guess it is a little weird, but it does make some sense. I mean, look at it, Norman is 14 years younger than Blake, and yet he is his superior because as an FBI agent, he literally outranks everyone that works in the police station. During the meeting, the player is given the choice to respond to Blake in a calm or aggressive way. But truth be told, it doesn't actually matter, because no matter which approach you choose, Blake will always be pissed at you in the end. The meeting concludes with Norman saying that the origami killer drowns his victims in rainwater, and that if the weather forecast is right, they have less than 72 hours to find the next child. The following 2 chapters are much different. Norman and Blake go to investigate a suspect whose psychological profile matches that of the killer. Blake breaks into his house without a warrant and they start snooping around. The suspect is called Nathaniel, an obsessed Christian who apparently has at least 50 crosses in his apartment and hears weird voices. After Blake taunts him, he calls him the Antichrist and pulls a gun on him. This is where the player is given the opportunity to decide how things will go down. If you are smart and use psychology, Jane will convince Nathaniel to put the gun down because he wouldn't be able to kill the Antichrist with it. But of course, if you act irrationally or panic, Jayden will shoot and kill Nathaniel. This doesn't have any repercussions in the story, but it does have repercussions for Jayden. And I have to say, Blake's reaction here is priceless.
I shot him.
Yep. Looks like you did. Can't say I'll miss him. Come on, let's go.
So this leads them to the next suspect, Miroslav Korda, who would run away as soon as he hears them coming. Something that leads to a hilarious chase scene throughout the market and a fight scene with Miroslav. Whether you win or lose, the fight scene does not really matter. I mean, it is a little humiliating for Jayden to get his ass kicked, and if you resist long enough, Blake will come there to save you, which could have been a very interesting moment. I mean, imagine, Blake is hostile to Jayden, but now he saves him, something that could have really helped build their relationship up. This could have been a very interesting character moment for Blake. However, it doesn't really matter whether you catch him or not. Miroslav had solid alibis for 3 of the murders and is not the origami killer. Nonetheless, the story continues as it is revealed that Ethan's wife, the main character of the game, believes that her husband is the origami killer due to his psychological issues and his visions of drowning bodies. So Norman and Blake go to talk to Ethan's therapist, and since he refuses to tell him anything, Blake starts beating him up. Here, the player is given a choice. You could intervene and stop Blake, or you could just let him beat the therapist with no consequences whatsoever. This is where the rivalry between Norman's by-the-book approach and Blake's violent approach really begins. You see, on one hand, Norman wants to respect the rules and the law. On the other hand, Blake is an unreasonable psychopath and just wants answers, and doesn't care how he gets them. He just wants to hear what he wants to hear. This is further shown if Ethan Mars is captured. Norman and Blake will have to interrogate him. Blake starts beating the shit out of the guy for no reason, and then the player has the option to have Norman stop him. Again though, this choice is here mostly as a moral choice. Whether you intervene or not, it doesn't actually matter. The therapist will still tell you that Ethan Mars has been making origami figures and has had psychological issues since his first son died. What happens next is predictable. Blake acts irrationally because that is all his character is, and goes after Ethan, and Norman decides that Ethan is not the origami killer because what kind of man would kill 8 children before kidnapping his own son? So if Ethan gets captured, Norman helps him escape and then goes to investigate on his own. During his investigation, Norman comes face to face with another killer called Mad Jack and the origami killer himself in the chapter Fish Tank, and Norman can easily die in these chapters. However, if the player is successful, he will be able to gather enough clues to locate the killer's car. These clues will allow the player to find out where the origami killer is keeping Sean Mars. But if the player is not fast enough, Jayden himself will die by overusing the Ari. I will not spoil how Norman solves the puzzle, because if you know, you know, and if you don't know, well, I think it makes for a very fun challenge. Now let's talk about his personality a little and what makes him so likable, or at least stand out when compared to the other characters in the game. All the characters in Heavy Rain have some kind of psychological or medical issue. Madison Paige has insomnia, Scott Shelby the private detective has miasma, Ethan has blackouts and depression, and Norman Jayden has severe addiction to a drug called tryptophan. He also might have schizophrenia as a result of the Ari. One of the things that lets players put themselves in Jayden's shoes early on is the fact that he is the most mysterious character in the entire game. Very little is known about him. Let's take a look at some of the information we actually have. We know that he is 34 years old, that he works for the FBI, and that he has a degree in criminal psychology. We know that he hates having nothing to do, and that he likes to have as much information as possible before he makes a decision. And that's it, I guess? Yeah, you can see why it is rather easy for the player to see themselves in Norman Jayden. Hell, we don't even know if the guy is fucking straight judging from the amount of fanfiction written about him. He has cool sunglasses and a batshit accent. It's a shame that Norman's backstory was not explored more in the cancelled DLC of Heavy Rain. Knowing his backstory would have been very interesting. Although Norman Jayden only appears in 13 chapters in the game, his presence definitely leaves a mark. Again, he brings a much needed sense of self-awareness to the story of Heavy Rain, and most importantly, gives a perspective into what the police is actually doing to try and find the origami killer, and apparently they are pretty bad at it. Here Norman becomes the voice of reason as he tries to convince the police that Ethan Mars is not the origami killer, but is eventually forced to solve the case on his own.
Blake is trying to beat a confession out of Ethan Mars. You've got to do something!
Which is more important, Norman?
finding little Sean Mars or sparing that lowlife a few bruises. You can't make omelets without breaking a few eggs.
God damn! Ethan Mars is innocent! We've got to get back to looking for Sean if we're to have any chance of finding him alive!
This case has worn you out, Norman. You need some time off to think it through.
Blake is convinced that Mars is the killer.
Not you. I thought there was some evidence to that effect.
That's true. But it just doesn't make sense. His psychological profile doesn't fit. Neither does the geolocalization. I can't see this father drowning 8 victims before kidnapping his own kid. Mars is not the origami killer. I'd stake my life on it.
Then who is?
I haven't the faintest fucking idea.
Another thing that I really like about Norman Jayden as a character is that throughout the course of the game, he shows that he's a very sympathetic character and also shows a lot of empathy too. Here's an example. If you kill Nathaniel, he will be shown troubled in the next chapter. And if you've picked the sincere option here, well, I'll just play the scene.
Was that the first time?
Sorry?
First time you killed somebody. It always does something to you the first time. Then you get used to it.
I'm not sure I want to get used to it.
Small scenes like this really highlight Norman's personality, although there aren't a lot of him in the game because he only appears in 13 chapters. For example, this scene right here is my favorite Norman Jayden scene. This scene occurs when the player has Norman give up on the case. Here, Norman really shows how vulnerable and guilty he really feels.
We've only got a few more hours left to save Sean Mars. There has to be a goddamn clue somewhere. It's probably staring me in the face. This kid's gonna die, and I'm going around in circles! I can't go on. I can't go on.
Other instances where he defies Blake's violent actions and helps Ethan Mars escape because he believes he's innocent also show how Norman Jayden is a very sympathetic character, but despite this, he managed to stay determined in his investigation and overall sense of justice. Hell, he's so determined he's willing to die just to solve the case. Also, just because he stops Blake from being violent himself doesn't mean he's unwilling to get his hands dirty.
Broke my fucking nose, pig!
Next, I'm gonna blow a hole in your face. Spill! All of it!
You don't scare me, Mr. CSI. You ain't got it in you. Damn! You out of your motherfucking mind, man?
Oh shit, Jack! Ain't nothing to it, just a little bit of self-defense. Page 1 of the police manual. Kill or be killed.
Whoa, stop, enough.
Probably the best example of Norman as a character is in the ending where he resigns from the FBI if he fails the investigation, but someone else saves Sean Mars. On the other hand, he will die of a tryptophan overdose if Sean Mars dies, because of the immense guilt that was consuming him. This might sound weak to you, but the fact that Norman Jayden is not some bulletproof superhero or some immortal John Wick-like android is what makes him so likable. To me at least. This is just a normal human being with a gun and some advanced glasses doing his best, trying to solve the case of the origami killer and find Sean Mars before it's too late, while simultaneously having to deal with drug addictions, incompetent cops, and God knows what. Anyway, let's explain Norman's endings. Norman Jayden has 4 different endings, all of which depend on the case. I'll be reviewing these endings from worst to best. The first and worst ending is called Smoking Mirror. In this ending, Norman survives Mad Jack and his fight with the origami killer but does not find the warehouse and save Sean Mars. Therefore, he is consumed by guilt, becomes an emotional wreck and goes crazy. He hallucinates while the Ari glasses and talks to a visual version of himself and dies from an overdose of tryptocane. Dark, but actually very accurate. It really suits his character and what we know about him. It's such a weird and yet fascinating scene in my opinion. Like, what does this mean? Why is Jayden talking to a version of himself? After all these years, I still don't know why this ending is called Smoking Mirror. The second worst ending is called Uploaded, and it's also pretty weird. Like, Norman dies in this ending, but then Blake starts using his Ari glasses and sees Norman smirking for some reason. Like, some people speculate that since the ending is called Uploaded, Norman's overuse of the Ari caused his memory and personality to be downloaded there. Thus, an artificial version of him is still living in the virtual world of the Ari. Others believe that Blake is just hallucinating things, and that's it. Yeah, next ending. His most successful ending is called Case Closed, and as the name suggests, it is achieved by successfully solving the case, winning the fight against the origami killer, and saving Sean Mars. In this ending, Norman is invited to a talk show and stops taking drugs. He becomes very successful. However, he still suffers some hallucinations because of the Ari, which might mean that the device has caused some permanent damage to his brain. His other ending, which is arguably his best, is called Resignation. And again, as the name explains, Norman resigns from the FBI and decides to lead something like a normal life, whatever that means. He quits his job, and even though his boss tells him he can keep the Ari because it will go offline next month, he refuses, saying it won't help him where he's going.
I think you better take it back. It's just a little too compelling and, well, it won't help me where I'm going. The real world.
A fitting answer that can be interpreted in different ways. On one hand, the Ari caused him to suffer from hallucinations and schizophrenia. On the other, the Ari also isolated him from other people and made him addicted to technology. Norman wanted to seek refuge in the virtual world of the Ari, this virtual butler where he could play the piano, play games, and live underwater, and all that amazing stuff he could do away from the troubles of the real world. But living in a virtual reality was poisoning him and stopping him from being the best man he could be. It's a very healthy message, especially in our modern times, and honestly, I really think it's his best ending. Because Norman's story ends the same way it started, with mystery. Overall, I think that Norman Jayden is a great character. He's mysterious, he's likable, he's empathetic, he's determined, and he's very strong. And he's also very human, which is what I like about him. Honestly, it's a shame he was not given the proper amount of chapters and backstory to fully develop and change throughout the story. But then again, that's what makes Norman so interesting. He's a mysterious character whose backstory and future is entirely on the player's hands.